Basic water infrastructures is also critical. Smart subsidies. Smart subsidies defined as the subsidies that are effectively targeted and yield better outcome without saddling the state with longer-term costs, can actually energize food production. It is in this respect that initiatives such as SAGOT and the Kilomonkwaza become so important. While the initiative itself is noteworthy, ensuring that small farmers are directly linked to the production process is vital for poverty reduction and food security. Industrial countries could assist in this process by facilitating what we call technology transfer. Just as the pharmaceutical sector, the basic technology in agriculture, which could actually have multiple positive effects in developing countries, could be made public after a certain given time period. The second proposal is to prioritize nutrition. The quality of food we eat matters for our development, but the calorie intake of most poor people is not sufficient for a healthy life. In Tanzania, for example, more than 25% of the population fall under this category. Nutrition is often a neglected area of public policy. Improving it needs to take center stage. Achieving better nutrition requires much more than advocacy about what people should eat. For example, the education of girls is widely regarded as one of the most important factors in improving nutrition for the next generation. Nutrition outreach and education initiatives also need to reach remote areas in development from adverse events and change. This should cash transfer for poor households and affordable insurance over yet to have a comprehensive social about repairing degraded breaks to protect crops, retain moisture in soil, empowering women, and other marginalized examples. When women are more educated, have control over risk, and nutritional level of food consumed is likely to increase. Labor force in developing countries, they have little, where women have equal right to such input.
And link it with nutritious outcome, it leads to human development. And at the same time, human development reinforces food security. Now, this is one of the reasons why this first report tried to link the food security aspect and human development. Now, in this presentation, what I try to do is to link these main elements to national context and perhaps regional context as well, looking at where we are. Now, if you look at the human development outcomes during the past decade or so, the Human Development Report for 2011, food security and food insecurity. The Sub-Saharan Africa's growth is, with this remarkable growth, we expect human, and also food insecurity is a huge natural resources. Policies, weak institutions, and shows you the level of human development in the world. And the dark blue part are basically in Sub-Saharan Africa. And out of the 30, and Haiti are from the outside region. 28
years in which per capita production in Tanzania falls rather low, and if you have slight of export of food production from that level of production, you will certainly have difficulties in ensuring food security. In this slide, I wanted to start with the proposition that the African Human Development Report of 2012 suggests that we need to have smart subsidies as one of the measures to alleviate food security problem in Tanzania. The graph that, the table that I've presented there is the area which is currently under food crop subsidies. We know the government of Tanzania reintroduced crop subsidies, particularly for food crops, toward the end of 2000s. And you can see the area that is covered under the level of subsidies provided to date is still rather.
Farmers are provided with inputs, and this is what you often hear when it comes to the cropping season, that there will be inputs sent to farmers, but you seldom hear about the quality of labor force that has to engage itself in producing the food. So they would have all the seeds, all the fertilizer and whatnot, but if the people are not able to produce because they are sick all the time, and this is what we observe, that during the crop production season, this is the time when we have high prevalence of malaria and other diseases, and most of the time people are sick and are not able to produce. If very few are able, then they'll be able to produce whatever they can afford at that particular time. So I guess we need also to pay attention to quality of human labor. Is it able really to produce?
Honorable members of parliament, honorable ambassadors and high commissioners, UN resident coordinator and UNDP resident representative, UN representatives, development partners, permanent secretaries, government officials, representatives from the private sector, NGOs and community-based organizations, invited guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to join you today for the launching ceremony of the first African Human Development Report 2012. I would like to thank the UN Resident Coordinator and UNDP Resident Representative and all other stakeholders for giving me the opportunity to grace the launching of the report. Indeed, it's a great honor and privilege to speak to this great audience. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the UNDP decision to prepare this historical report is highly welcomed and appreciated. I thank you for your efforts and dedication. The African Human Development Report 2012, titled Towards a Food Secure Future, provides a timely opportunity for African countries, Sub-Sahara in particular, to assess their current strategies in regard to food security and human development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the report seeks to establish the backward and forward linkages between food security and human development in Africa. The main areas being raising agricultural productivity for small and large-scale farmers, meeting the nutrition challenge, especially among children, building resilience and managing risks in communities, and increasing empowerment among women and the rural poor. The report also seeks to understand the deeper causes behind the constant stress in food security that runs from food availability through food access to food use in sub-Saharan Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the report has shown that despite the fact that some of the world's fastest growing economies for the past 10 years are in Africa, the majority of African people remain poor. During this period, Africa has experienced numerous incidents of acute food insecurity with immense loss of lives and livelihoods, most specifically in sub-Saharan and Sahel region of West Africa. This is one of the biggest challenges for our governments are struggling to overcome so that every African can enjoy the benefits of economic growth. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the poverty in Africa is a rural phenomenon. Statistics indicate that more than 75% of the poor people in Africa live in rural areas and depend on agriculture for food and livelihood. Given the predominant role of agriculture in the livelihoods of most Africans, any strategy for purging poverty and hunger must center on transforming the agricultural and rural sector. It is indisputable that agriculture is still key to development and poverty reduction in most developing countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa. African governments must therefore make investments aimed at increasing agricultural productivity and transforming the rural sector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the agriculture sector plays an important role in the Tanzanian economy and possesses the potential to advance the country's objectives of food security, growth, and poverty reduction. The performance of the overall Tanzanian economy has largely been driven by the performance of the agriculture sector. Due to its large share in the economy, agriculture in Tanzania employs the majority of the poor and has strong consumption linkages with other sectors. Since poverty is predominantly a rural phenomenon and agriculture is a major economic activity for rural population, then success in food security and poverty reduction depends critically on performance of the agriculture sector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Tanzania is urging for more investment in agriculture and in particular the effective participation of the private sector to lead the transformation of the agricultural sector. I'm sure this partnership is the beginning of the end of subsistence farming, backwardness, and low agricultural productivity. Given Tanzania's agriculture potentials, its transformation will have a greater impact on the overall economic growth and development of the country. Many other sectors, such as agro-processing, manufacturing, and service industry in the agricultural value chain will benefit. This spillover effect has already occurred in other developing countries with similar characteristics like ours. In Brazil, India, Vietnam, and other Asian countries, the successful Green Revolution was the main force behind their current economic strength. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the main driver of our economic transformation is the private sector. The government is purely a facilitator as well as a coordinator, leaving the economic undertakings in the hands of the private sector. It is therefore important that each partner plays its role more effectively because they are equally important and depend on each other. The private sector is an indispensable partner of the public sector, and the opposite is true. The governments will therefore continue to foster the private sector and promote entrepreneurship in the country. I also appeal to the private sector to take opportunities that are unfolding in the country. They should be proactive and forge joint ventures so as to strengthen their financial base. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, country growth, development, and poverty reduction policies have a crucial role in advancing agricultural and rural sectors. Food security and agricultural sector transformation has been the mainstay of the overall national development agenda. This is being implemented through the various country strategies and programs, specifically the Mkukuta, the 5-year development plan 2010-2011 to 2016, agricultural sector development program, Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania, and Kilimo Kwanza initiative, all of which aim at transforming the agricultural and rural sector for improving food security and the livelihood of the majority of Tanzanians. I take cognizance of the fact that nutrition is also to come in as a priority, and I will take it up personally as a Minister of Finance to ensure that it is incorporated in the plans going forward. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, social protection is another area of attention. Social securities are limited, not well developed, and if any, disregard marginalized groups. Low-income households are particularly vulnerable to risk and negative external shocks due to their low asset base. In the absence of functioning social protection, poor people in developing countries have created a number of formal and advancing agriculture and informal instruments to manage such risk. These include risk pooling schemes, income support, and consumption smoothing arrangements. However, such informal and formal approaches offer limited protection, low returns for households, and are prone to break down during emergencies. Also, these schemes rely heavily on personal relations between participants and location. Even formal support programs such as Food for Work may be exclusionary, as in the case of female-headed households, often left out of such work programs, as they face difficulty making the required labor contribution. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need to address the constraints to agricultural rural sector and protection transformation if we are to make any meaningful progress in this area. These include infrastructure constraints and affordable infrastructure, lack of access to support services, such as financial services, technological and information services, marketing services, and safety nets. Continued dependence on rain-fed agriculture and institutional constraints such as guidelines and supervision. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, empowering women who make up almost half of the agricultural labor force in sub-Saharan Africa is a highly efficient way to achieve progress across the multiple dimensions of food security. In rural areas, women play a key role in running households and make major contributions to agricultural production. But the inequalities that still exist between women and men make it difficult for them to fulfill their potential. They rarely have access to the resources that would make their work more productive and ease their heavy workload. As a result, they and their families, communities, and rural economies are held back. Empowering women is therefore of paramount importance in transforming the agricultural sector and the rural economy. Thus, women's empowerment must remain a central priority because equality and non-discrimination are of intrinsic value. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I appeal to all stakeholders, the government, private sector, development partners, at all levels to take note of the areas highlighted in this first African Human Development Report and integrate them in their policies, strategies, and plans for implementation. The challenges outlined should be addressed in order to improve food security and agricultural productivity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, again, I would like to commend the UNDP for producing the report, which I believe will contribute to improving the agricultural productivity and food security. With these few remarks, it is now my pleasure to declare the first African Human Development Report 2012 officially launched. Thank you. All right. How do I do this? I cut the tape. All right. Oh, didn't cut that one. Too many ribbons. Okay. Thank you very much.
Have confirmed the relevance of this year's report to Tanzania, where food insecurity persists amid abundant resources and despite progress in human development and economic growth. We've heard two important messages today. The first message is that food security is not only about increasing agricultural productivity, but also about access to food and use of food, and thus spread across many development areas: trade, finance, education, land, environment, infrastructure, energy. The second one is that the report reaffirmed the nexus between food security and human development. Low human development tend to induce food security issues. And on the other hand, food security issues hinder human development progress. So we find sometimes in a catch-22 situation. On the positive side, policy options to improve food security do exist. We've heard some this morning. The report also shares plenty of examples, such as productive safety net, fertilizer subsidy scheme, solar power drip irrigation, nutrition-focused policies, weather index insurances, social transfer programs, or commodity exchanges. Some of those public policies are already being considered by Tanzania. Implementing them will require sustained leadership and shifting funding allocation. At the same time, we've heard of two potential threats that are hanging on the horizon. One is a decline in rainfall due to climate change. Another one is population growth. And because of those, now is decision time. We've heard it, food security will require turning from rhetoric to action. So we hope this report will have contributed to that. The report is available online to all policy and decision makers. It has been distributed here, but it's available to anyone online freely. And we sincerely hope that it will contribute to the debate and policy making on food security. With this said, I would like to thank our guests of honor, thank the two panelists, and of course all participants for joining us this morning. Thank you very much.
Ripoti yenyewe kwa Tanzania kwa tarakimu zilizotolewa, takwimu zilizotolewa kwa maendeleo, tumepiga hatua nzuri. Lakini bado tuna changamoto katika masuala ya kujihakikishia usalama wa chakula, upatikanaji wa chakula na usalama wa chakula, na vile vile katika masuala ya lishe bora. Bado tuna kiwango kikubwa sana cha utapiamlo kwa watoto na hasa kwa maeneo ya vijijini. Kwa hiyo ni changamoto kwetu kuwa tuhakikishe kuwa zile sera zote tunazoziweka sisi zinazingatia sana masuala ya usalama wa chakula, kwa maana ya upatikanaji wa chakula na vile vile ubora wa chakula kinachotumika, lakini vile vile katika kushughulikia changamoto ya utapiamlo na udumavu wa watoto kutokana na kutokula chakula bora. Kwa hayo maeneo mawili bado tuko nyuma kidogo, lakini sio sisi Tanzania pekee yetu. Ni eneo zima la chini ya Sahara, kusini chini ya Sahara. Kwa hiyo hilo ni changamoto kubwa ambayo itabidi kulifanyia kazi. Na kwa bahati nzuri hii ripoti vile vile imeainisha nini kifanyike. Na bahati nzuri vile vile katika haya ambayo yamependekezwa yafanyike, Tanzania tayari imeshaanza kuyafanyia kazi. Kwa maana ya kuwa tayari imeshaweka sera na mifumo ya kuboresha uzalishaji wa chakula. Tayari inashughulikia swala zima la jinsi gani vya chakula kiwe kinasafirishwa kutoka maeneo ambayo kuna chakula kingi na maeneo ambayo yana upungufu. Lakini swala ambalo mimi ningependa sana tulizingatie ni swala la lishe bora. Hiyo imeonekana kwa kiasi kikubwa kuwa imepungua umuhimu wake katika vile vipaumbele serikali ilivyoweka. Kwa hiyo sasa pamoja na kuzingatia chakula bora, pamoja na kuzingatia kupunguza udumavu, tunataka tusimamie sasa hivi lishe iwe kama vile ni kipaumbele vile vile. Kwa usizungumzie kilimo, usizungumzie chakula bora bila kutaja swala la afya ya mlaji. Kwa maana ya kuwa tusizingatie aina moja tu ya vyakula, kwa sababu kila unapozungumzia usalama wa chakula tunazungumzia zaidi nafaka. Lakini tunaangalia kuwa kutokana na udumavu na utapiamlo unaokabili wa Tanzania wengi, hasa watoto, kuna haja vile vile ya kutoa elimu kubwa kwa wananchi na kuwaelimisha juu ya kulima mazao ambayo pia yakitumiwa pamoja na nafaka ndio yataleta lishe bora na kupunguza utapiamlo na udumavu kwa watoto. tumeona vile vile moja kwa moja kuwa chakula kukosekana na ubora wa chakula ukipungua unaathiri hata ile nguvu kazi ya taifa. Kama watoto wanakuwa wadumavu tangu wakiwa wadogo, kwa vyote vile watakuwa na afya ambazo hazijaboreka. Sasa wakiwa wakubwa unawategemea hawa ndio watakuwa nguvu kazi ya kulima, nguvu kazi ya kufanya kazi nyingine. Watafanyaje ikiwa chakula walichokuwa kila kimewadumaza? Kwa hilo ni jambo ambalo hatuwezi kulikwepa. Kama unataka kuwa na nguvu kazi na rasilimali watu nzuri, lazima iwe inakula chakula kizuri tangu wakiwa watoto. Sasa hili ni swala ambalo serikali inabidi lifanyie kazi kwa kutumia wizara zote zinazohusika. Kuna wizara kubwa sana hapa ya wizara ya maendeleo ya jamii, watoto na jinsia, kuna wizara ya afya na ustawi wa jamii, kuna wizara ya kilimo yenyewe, kuna wizara ya mifugo, kuna wizara za uvuvi na kuna wizara ya fedha ambayo itasimamia masuala ya bajeti zitakazoingia katika kuhakikisha kuwa sasa hiyo mifumo inaboreka. Wote nchi zetu zote zina changamoto zinazofanana kwa masuala ya sera. Wengi sera zetu zinafanana. Kwa ni swala tu sasa la kuzingatia vipaumbele gani tuviweke ili kuhakikisha kuwa chakula, ubora wa chakula na upatikanaji wa chakula unaimarishwa, uzalishaji unaimarishwa. Bahati nzuri ni katika kanda hii vile vile ambayo tuna ardhi nzuri, tuna vyanzo vingi vya maji. Kwa sasa hivi ni kuweka kipaumbele katika kuzalisha chakula. So, vyakula duniani vimepanda, ina maana kuwa sisi tukizalisha tutauza kwa bei kubwa na tutapata pesa zaidi. Kwa ilikuwa sisi ile nafasi tuitumie vizuri. Walipokuwa na matatizo ya chakula kule na bei zikapanda, sisi moja kwa moja ilikuwa sasa tufanye mchaka kulima zaidi, kuzalisha haraka zaidi, tupate kuuza, kwa sababu ile ilikuwa ni fursa kwetu. Kwa hiyo tutakuwa kama tumeipoteza hiyo fursa tusipoangalia kwa bei za kupanda, bei za chakula zikipanda, sio kuwa ni kitu kibaya kwetu. Wakati mwingine kinaweza kuwa ni kitu kizuri.
Tusizungumze mambo ya kwamba tumesogea au tukusokea, ila tuone kwamba inazungumzia swala muhimu sana kwa uchumi wa Tanzania. Inazungumzia mambo ya kilimo, na tunajua kilimo kwetu hapa ndio mkombozi wetu, ndio kitaweza kuongeza kipato, ndio kinaweza kupunguza umaskini. Na hivi karibuni rais wetu alikuwa Marekani, ameweza kupata fedha nyingi kwa ajili ya kilimo. Kwa hiyo nasema hii ripoti imekuja wakati mwafaka.
Labda matokeo yake yakoje hasa kwa upande wa Tanzania kwa ujumla?
Matokeo ni mazuri. Tunajua kuna changamoto nyingi ambazo kilimo cha Tanzania kilicho nacho, lakini tukiangalia kwenye hii ripoti sasa tunaona vitu gani vifanyike. Kwa mfano tumeona umuhimu kama tunataka kukuza tija kwenye kilimo, ni lazima tuweke mkazo kwenye umwagiliaji, kwenye swala zima la umwagiliaji, na vile kuna kutumia vifaa vya kisasa katika kuongeza tija. Lakini vile vile ni lazima uhakikishe wakati huo masoko yanakuwepo, na miundombinu ya umwagiliaji, miundombinu ya barabara za vijijini na lazima viwepo. Na sio hiyo tu, hata maghala ya kuhifadhi mazao ili uweze kupunguza mazao kuharibika, na vile vile uweze kufanya wakulima wapate bei nzuri, sio tu wakati wanapovuna mara hiyo wanauza. Na kwa sababu kila mtu anavuna na kuuza wakati huo, atakuwa anapata sio bei nzuri sana.
To other countries, well, let's say that first of all, let me maybe state that this one is actually the first human development report on Africa. So as compared to the other usual global human development report, this one is
wanapata sio bei nzuri sana.
To other countries, well, let's say that first of all, let me maybe state that this one is actually the first human development report on Africa. So as compared to the other usual global human development report, this one is very specific on the Africa region. And the theme in itself, actually, it's even very more specific. It is on the future of food security. So as we're looking globally on the report itself, there are about few key messages. We're asking ourselves the question in terms of Africa is a continent that has a lot of land. Africa is a continent that has a lot of natural resources, water and everything. Yet we're asking ourselves the question, why is it that we still have food and security and nutrition? So the report tried to basically stage on those key questions and try to find the root causes of all those reasons why we still have in Africa food insecurity and malnutrition, and give
what are the outcomes for our countries?
For our countries, basically, let me say that I was trying to give you actually a summary of four key challenges in brief. So you have, to look at how we need to increase what we call agricultural productivities. That, I think, is the number one. As you're looking in the country, you have regions that are not all the same endowment in terms of state. Some of the regions are indeed have food surplus, others have actually deficiency. So there is a need to increase agricultural productivity. And in order for that, you need to look at either infrastructure in terms of build. You need to also look, the second message is how you're actually looking at resilience, building in terms of empowering, the small farmers. We're talking about smart subsidies, which is actually a very key and important element to bring into the picture as far as that is concerned. The third is nutrition. Nutrition, as far as we're concerned, we have a lot of malnutrition, and we're looking at the consequences. So the country, unfortunately, fall within the 25% of the population that indeed is not eating the right type of food, the right type of nutrient, the right type of vitamins. So that is also something that, that Tanzania has to take. And then the last
Many thanks.
The last part, I think, is with regard to empowerment of women. And so empowerment of women with regard to, nutrition, because then you will have a better outcome. So that's what I would say in a nutshell.
Many thanks.